Meantime, states across the country this morning are applauding, but at the same time trying to figure out how to improve the safety of the nation's drinking water following a landmark proposal Tuesday by the Environmental Protection Agency.
Yeah, it's the country's first ever national standard that's limiting the so-called forever chemicals, also known as toxic PFAS. Now, the EPA estimates implementation of these new rules could reduce PFAS exposure for nearly 100 million Americans and decrease cancer rates, heart disease, and birth complications. PFAS have been used since the 1940s in a wide variety of industrial and consumer products such as nonstick pans, carpeting, waterproof clothing, food packaging, cosmetics, cleaning items. The list goes on and on. It's things we all use every day. But there's been no federal limit on the chemical compounds, and that has been set until now.
Betsy Southerland knows something about this subject. She's the former director of science and technology for the Environmental Protection Agency's Office of Water. Betsy, thank you so much for joining us early this morning. You know, most people don't think twice about their tap water. They put a cup under it and drink it. Can you give us a sense of how rampant these forever chemicals are in our tap water and what makes these PFAS so dangerous?
So EPA just started monitoring drinking water systems throughout the country in 2013 to 2015, and they found it in really hundreds of these water supply systems. And of course, at that time, we had very primitive analytical methods. EPA this year began another process that will last until 2025 of remonitoring all the public health systems in the country to see at these lower detection limits if they have even more of these PFAS chemicals in their system. So it looks like it's a very widespread problem.
So, Betsy, help me understand here. If we've known for so long that these are potentially dangerous, why has it taken so long for the government to do anything about the issue?
So this is a complaint, you know, everyone has, and it's easy to understand if you look at the processes that we're required to follow under federal laws. So in 2008, EPA announced that they were going to have all this voluntary phase out of PFAS chemicals. So by 2015, we wouldn't have to worry about these. Unfortunately, they stayed in the environment for decades after they've been released. So even though many of these chemicals were voluntarily phased out in the United States, their manufacture, they still persist in the environment for decades to come. So again, it took EPA a long time to develop the analytical methods to even see if these chemicals were in our drinking water. And then under the Safe Drinking Water Act, we have a multi-year process where first we must monitor all the systems to see if there are enough contamination nationwide to justify a national drinking water standard. Then we have to assess and determine the toxicity of each of the PFAS we want to regulate. Then we have to propose a rule, and then we have to finalize the rule. So It's designed to be a multi-year process. Fortunately, 10 states have already used their state law and have already put in place drinking water standards for some PFAS chemicals.
So this, you just said, this is a multi-year process. And if it is indeed implemented, how do you go ahead and just change all of it? Who will pay for it? It's estimated to cost about $772 million.
So let's talk first about the timing. EPA proposed stringent, actually, drinking water standard than even the 10 states that currently have laws on the books. And so that will have to be finalized. EPA is saying they want to finalize it by the end of this year, and that then all water supply systems would have to be in compliance in 3 years from that date. So that would be 2026, December of 2026. Here's what systems have as 3 possibilities to come into compliance with the rule. Number one, they could find the source of contamination and cut that off. That would solve their problem, and they wouldn't have to do any additional treatment at the drinking water plant. Number two, they could switch to a clean drinking water source. So again, they wouldn't have to treat. But number three, and we think this will possibly be the most frequently used alternative, they will have to upgrade their treatment systems. Right now, the bipartisan infrastructure law provides $9 billion for all the public drinking water systems in the country to access to help them address PFAS. So that will be a huge help, but that's taxpayer money.
Right.
So the next thing we need to look at is what authorities do we have to have the industry pay?
Well,
And EPA is in the process of setting a new rule that will declare these chemicals hazardous substances and will allow the states to go after the industry that caused this problem to pay for it.
well, and the industry, they're already kind of pushing back. The lobbying group for the chemical industry, the American Chemistry Group, what they're saying is they have concerns about this proposal, but the head of the National Association for Water Companies said smaller and poor communities are likely to be disproportionately affected by these rules and wants Congress to require the chemical manufacturers to pay for the cleanup. What's the possibility of that really happening?
We're going to have to use every authority that EPA and the states have to make sure that happens. Right now, EPA's rule shows that the effective treatment technologies are affordable even for small systems. So if they can get the funding, they can definitely get rid of these PFAS in their drinking water. So again, $9 billion of federal money, taxpayers' money, is available to help them. And then again, I think this hazardous waste designation, which EPA hopes to finalize this year, will really help states and public water supply systems go after the polluters to have them finance these treatment upgrades.
All right, Betsy Southerland, former member of the Environmental Protection Network, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.